When the immigration letter arrived, my husband didn't panic or comfort me. He just nodded like he'd been expecting it, and that was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 31 years old, and if you saw my life from the outside, you'd probably think it was aggressively normal. Suburban house with vinyl siding. I didn't grow up here. I moved to the United States from Argentina 9 years ago on a student visa. The plan was always temporary, get my degree, work a few years, go back home with better prospects. My parents threw a goodbye barbecue, cried a lot, and told everyone I was going to become the American cousin. Somewhere along the way, temporary turned into permanent. After graduation, I landed a job as a workplace safety coordinator for a manufacturing company outside Columbus, Ohio. Good health insurance. Predictable hours. The kind of job immigrants cling to because stability is oxygen when you're far from everything familiar. I met Marcus about a year later. It was at a coworker's birthday dinner at a loud sports bar where you have to lean in to hear anything. Marcus was a friend of a friend, sitting across the table, laughing at jokes he didn't even hear properly. He had that easy confidence some men have, not flashy, not loud, just settled. Like he always knew exactly where he belonged. At one point, he leaned across the table and said, "You have an accent. Where are you from?" Normally, I hated that question. It always made me feel like a novelty item. But his tone wasn't performative curiosity, it sounded like genuine interest. "Argentina," I said. He smiled. "So you're the most interesting person here. Good to know." It was a dumb line, completely transparent. And yet it worked. He walked me to my car afterward, even though it was still light out and the parking lot was full. We stood there talking for almost another hour, neither of us ready to leave. He told me he worked as an operations manager at a logistics warehouse. Early mornings, long shifts, lots of responsibility. He seemed proud of it without bragging. Before I got in my car, he said, "I'd like to see you again." Not in a group. Just us. I remember driving home with this weird flutter in my chest, like something had shifted. Dating him felt easy. That's the word that keeps coming back to me. Easy in a way my life hadn't been for years. No complicated visa talk, no awkward cultural misunderstandings, no feeling like I had to explain why I sent money home or why certain holidays mattered to me. He asked questions. Real ones. About my family, my childhood, my plans. He listened in a way that made me feel solid, like my story wasn't just background noise. 6 months in, he started casually bringing up the future. Not in a pressure way. More like gentle hypotheticals. "Have you ever thought about staying here permanently? Do you see yourself wanting kids someday? Would you ever buy a house in Ohio, or would you move somewhere warmer?" At the time, it felt romantic. Like he was picturing a life with me in it. Around the 1-year mark, my work visa renewal became uncertain. There were layoffs at my company, restructuring, rumors that international employees would be the first to go because sponsorships were expensive. I tried not to panic, but it was always humming in the background. Marcus noticed. One night, while we were washing dishes together, he said quietly, "We could just get married." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He didn't laugh back. "I'm serious," he said. "I don't want to lose you because of paperwork." There was something deeply comforting about that sentence. Not dramatic, not grand, just practical devotion. He wasn't proposing with fireworks. He was offering stability. We got engaged 2 months later. Married 3 months after that in a small courthouse ceremony with a handful of friends. No family from Argentina could make it on such short notice, which I told myself was fine. We'd do a big celebration later. Later never came. The first year of marriage was honestly good. Not movie romance good, but solid. We rented a small house in a quiet subdivision where every home looked slightly different but somehow identical at the same time. Beige siding, tidy lawns, Amazon packages on porches. Marcus insisted we adopt a dog because a house doesn't feel like a home without one. That's how Baxter entered our lives, all oversized paws and nervous energy. We hosted game nights with my friend Hannah and her husband Dylan. Ordered takeout. Drank cheap wine. Laughed about nothing important. Those nights felt like proof that I had built a real life here, not just a temporary one. Marcus handled most of the administrative parts of our marriage. Taxes, insurance, mortgage pre-approval discussions we never quite acted on. He was good at that stuff, and I was relieved not to think about it. "Marriage means no secrets," he said when we combined finances. Everything shared. At the time, it sounded like trust. Looking back, I'm not sure it was. Around our 3rd year together, something shifted. Not dramatically. No big fight, no obvious betrayal. Just a slow tightening, like the air pressure changing before a storm. It started with money. Marcus became particular. That's the nicest word I can use. He didn't yell or accuse me of anything, but he started asking questions about every expense. "Why was the grocery bill so high this week? Do you really need another pair of work shoes? You sent money home again? How much this time?" Sending money to my parents had always been part of my life here. They weren't destitute, but my dad's health wasn't great, and my income in dollars stretched much further back home. Marcus had known this from the beginning. Now he would get quiet afterward. Not angry, worse. Disappointed. Like I had failed some invisible test. He built spreadsheets. Detailed ones. Categories, percentages, projections. He never explicitly said I couldn't spend money, but the implication hung there. One night I joked, "Are you auditing me?" He didn't smile. "I just think we should be responsible," he said. Especially with everything uncertain. Uncertain about what? He never clarified. The arguments started soon after. Small things that spiraled strangely fast. If I got emotional, he would go very still, very calm, in a way that made me feel loud even if I wasn't raising my voice. "You're getting worked up," he'd say. "I don't feel comfortable when conversations escalate. Can we talk about this when you're calmer?" The first time he said that, I apologized immediately. It sounded reasonable, mature, like something a therapist would say. But over time, I realized the pattern. Any display of emotion from me became evidence that I was the problem. Meanwhile, he remained perfectly composed. A year ago, I discovered he had opened a separate bank account. I found the statement tucked into a folder while looking for tax documents. When I asked about it, he didn't get defensive. "It's just a precaution," he said. "Financial independence is healthy. Independence. In a marriage that supposedly had no secrets." I wanted to argue, but something in his tone shut me down. Calm, measured, unbothered. Like the conversation was already over whether I agreed or not. Then came the recordings. The first time, he placed his phone on the kitchen counter between us while we were discussing bills. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just recording," he said casually. "So we don't misremember later." I laughed because it felt absurd. He didn't laugh. From then on, it became normal. Any serious conversation, his phone would appear face down on the table recording. He never hid it. That almost made it worse. It was like being under surveillance with permission you didn't remember giving. I started choosing my words carefully, then over-carefully, then sometimes not speaking at all. Our house became very quiet. 3 months ago, the letter arrived. Official envelope. Government seal. My name typed in stark black letters. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. Something about government mail triggers a primal fear when your entire right to stay in a country depends on paperwork. It was an inquiry regarding our marriage. Additional documentation requested. Possible interview. Language that looked polite but felt threatening. My conditional green card was expiring soon, and we were supposed to file jointly to remove the conditions. This kind of inquiry wasn't unheard of, but it meant scrutiny. Questions. Proof that our marriage was real. I walked into the living room where Marcus was watching TV. "Marcus," I said, my voice already thin. "Something's wrong." He muted the television and took the letter. His eyes scanned it once. No widening. No confusion. No concern. He handed it back. "These things happen," he said. "Don't worry." That was it. No hug. No reassurance. No, "We'll figure it out together." Just calm acceptance. I remember standing there thinking, why does he look like he was expecting this? That night I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying his reaction, trying to find another explanation. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he didn't understand how serious it felt to me. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to get water. His laptop was open on the dining table, screen glowing in the dark. I wasn't planning to look. I really wasn't. But my name was visible in the preview pane of an email. So I did. And that's when everything started to unravel. I wish I could say I respected his privacy and walked away from the laptop, but the truth is my heart was already pounding so hard I felt dizzy, like my body knew something before my brain did. The email subject line had my name in it. Not just Claire, but my full name, Claire Donovan, formal, clinical, the way institutions refer to you when you're a case file instead of a person. I clicked it. The thread was between Marcus and an immigration attorney I had never heard of. Not the lawyer we'd consulted together years earlier when we filed my initial paperwork. Someone else entirely. The messages stretched back months. My hands started shaking so badly I had to brace my wrist against the table to keep the cursor steady. Marcus had written, "I'm concerned my spouse may have entered the marriage under false pretenses. There have been ongoing issues with emotional volatility, financial secrecy, and unpredictable behavior. I'm seeking guidance on how to protect myself." For a moment, I genuinely thought he must be talking about someone else. That there had to be some context I was missing. Because the alternative, that he meant me, didn't fit any reality I recognized. The attorney's reply was careful, professional. "If you believe the marriage is not bona fide or you feel unsafe, documentation will be important. Maintain financial separation, keep records of interactions, and avoid confrontations that could escalate." My chest felt tight, like someone was slowly pulling a cord through my ribcage. Another email from Marcus. "I have begun documenting incidents and limiting shared financial exposure. My primary concern is potential retaliation if I attempt to end the relationship." Retaliation. The word sat there on the screen like a threat I didn't understand. I scrolled further. There were bullet points. Dates. Brief descriptions of arguments, normal arguments, written in language that made them sound alarming. Subject became tearful and raised voice when discussing finances. Subject accused me of controlling behavior. Subject sent funds overseas without consultation. Subject displayed emotional instability. Subject. Not wife. Not Claire. Subject. My stomach lurched so hard I thought I might throw up right there on the hardwood floor. One line made my vision blur. If necessary, evidence of instability may support concerns regarding the legitimacy of the marriage. I snapped the laptop shut so fast the sound echoed through the house. Marcus shifted on the couch in the living room but didn't wake up. I stood there in the dark, breathing through my mouth like I'd just run miles, trying to decide whether what I'd read was real. Part of me wanted to wake him up immediately, shove the laptop in his face, demand an explanation. Another part of me was suddenly afraid to. I went back to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling while his breathing stayed slow and even beside me. The distance between us felt enormous, like we were in separate rooms instead of the same bed. At some point, I started crying silently, the kind where your shoulders shake but no sound comes out because you don't want the other person to know. Morning came like nothing had happened. Marcus made coffee. Let Baxter out. Asked if I wanted eggs or toast. He looked exactly the same as he had the day before, the same calm face, the same steady voice. I kept waiting for him to reveal that he knew I had seen the emails, that he was going to confront me, but he didn't. Finally, I said it. I saw your messages. He paused mid-sip of coffee. Not startled. Not defensive. Just paused. What messages? He asked. The ones to the lawyer. He set his mug down carefully, like it was fragile. You went through my laptop? It wasn't outrage in his voice. More like disappointment. Controlled. Measured. My name was on the screen, I said. I wasn't snooping. A long silence stretched between us. Then he nodded once, like he had reached a conclusion. I figured you might find out eventually. That sentence made my skin go cold. You're telling a lawyer I'm unstable, I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. You're documenting me like I'm dangerous. Why? He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands together. Claire, things haven't been stable for a while. What does that even mean? You get overwhelmed. Emotional. It makes conflict hard to resolve. I stared at him. That's normal. People have emotions. Yes, he said gently, but not to the extent you do. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. So you're trying to get me deported? I asked. He didn't react to the word deported. Didn't flinch. Didn't deny it outright. I don't control immigration decisions, he said calmly. I'm just protecting myself. Protecting himself from what? I wanted to scream that question, but something inside me was shrinking, folding inward like a burned piece of paper. You wrote that you're afraid of retaliation, I said quietly. From me. I don't know how you'd react if I said I wanted space, he replied. I've seen you spiral. Spiral. Another word that made me sound like a case study instead of a person. Crying isn't retaliation, I said. Arguing isn't abuse. I didn't say it was, he said softly. But it can escalate. There was no way to argue with him because he wasn't accusing me of anything concrete. Just implying risk. Suggesting concern. Framing everything as caution. By the end of the conversation, I felt like I had done something wrong even though I couldn't identify what. After that day, something fundamental shifted. Marcus became almost nicer. Attentive in a careful, distant way. He cooked dinner more often. Asked about my day. Suggested we watch shows together in the evening. But the recordings didn't stop. If anything, they became more consistent. Phone on the table. Screen dark. Silent observer. I started noticing other things too. He used headphones when talking on the phone now, stepping outside or into the garage. He logged out of accounts on shared devices. Documents disappeared from the filing cabinet in his home office. It felt like living with someone who was slowly packing up an invisible life. I began documenting too. Screenshots of bank statements. Photos of letters. Notes on my phone with dates and times of conversations. I didn't even know what I would do with the information. It just felt necessary, like gathering supplies before a storm. One evening, I confided in Hannah. We were sitting in her kitchen while her kids played upstairs, the smell of something baking filling the air. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but once I started, it all spilled out in a rush. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to concern to outright alarm. Claire, she said finally, that doesn't sound normal. I don't know what normal is anymore, I admitted. Have you talked to a lawyer yourself? The idea hadn't even occurred to me. It felt disloyal, like preparing for divorce meant admitting the marriage was already over. I don't want to escalate things, I said. Honey, she said gently, he already has. I drove home feeling both validated and more terrified than before. Marcus was in the living room when I walked in, Baxter curled at his feet. He looked up and smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. How was Hannah's? Good, I said automatically. He nodded, then added casually, you were gone a while. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. Not accusatory, just observant. Traffic. Kids. Coffee. I mumbled something vague and went to change clothes, my hands trembling as I closed the bedroom door behind me. Later that night, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, he said, we should start gathering documents for the immigration response. My stomach dropped. So we're filing together? I asked carefully. We'll see what makes sense, he replied, meeting my eyes in the mirror. We want to do this correctly. We. But his tone didn't sound like partnership. It sounded like strategy. A week later, another piece fell into place, or maybe out of place. Dylan mentioned it by accident during a barbecue at their house. Marcus said he's been staying up late gaming with some people overseas. He said casually while flipping burgers. Sounds like a fun group. I blinked. Gaming. Yeah, like online stuff. He said there's this woman in the UK who's hilarious. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Marcus had never mentioned gaming. Not once. He barely played anything beyond the occasional phone app. When I asked him about it that night, he didn't look guilty. Just mildly surprised. Oh, Kara, he said. She's going through a rough time. We just talk sometimes. Talk, how? Online. Voice chat. How often? He shrugged. Late evenings. It helps her. Helps her. I tried to keep my voice steady. Do you send her money? A pause. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. Sometimes, he admitted. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. We had argued about grocery bills, about money to my parents, about every small expense, but sending money to a stranger overseas wasn't worth mentioning. You never told me, I said. I didn't think it would matter, he replied calmly. You seemed stressed enough. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared into the darkness with a single thought looping in my head. He's building a life that doesn't include me. Whether that life would happen here or somewhere else. I didn't know. But for the first time, the possibility felt real. After I found out about Kara, I stopped sleeping properly. Not the dramatic kind of insomnia where you're wide awake all night, worse. I would fall asleep from exhaustion, then wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning with my heart racing, like my body was trying to warn me about something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. Marcus, meanwhile, slept perfectly. He had this ability to exist inside calm like it was a sealed room no one else could enter. Even when things between us felt tense, he would brush his teeth, set his alarm, turn off the light, and be asleep within minutes. No tossing, no sighing, no late-night scrolling. Just peace. It started to feel unnatural. One night, I woke up to the faint glow of light under the bedroom door. For a second, I thought maybe I dreamed it, but when I rolled over, Marcus wasn't in bed. I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. My chest tightened immediately. I walked down the hallway slowly, trying not to make the floorboards creak. The living room was dark, but the office door was closed, light spilling out from underneath. I stood there for a full minute, listening. Muffled voices. His voice, low and soft in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. And a woman's voice, tinny through headphones. I didn't burst in. I didn't knock. I just stood there, frozen, feeling like I had accidentally stepped into a life that existed parallel to mine. Eventually, I went back to bed. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't ready to see proof of what I already suspected. In the morning, he acted completely normal. Morning, he said, kissing my forehead like he always did. I wanted to ask where he'd been, who he'd been talking to, why it sounded intimate. Instead, I said, morning, and made coffee with shaking hands. Living like that, holding questions inside until they rot, does something to your brain. Everything becomes suspicious. Every late notification, every unexplained errand, every slight change in routine. About 2 weeks later, the immigration situation escalated. Another letter arrived. This one thicker, more formal. It requested additional evidence of a bona fide marriage, joint assets, shared responsibilities, proof of cohabitation, photographs, affidavits from friends. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the list, my vision blurring. This wasn't just a routine check anymore. It felt like an investigation. Marcus came home from work while I was still sitting there, the envelope open in front of me. He loosened his tie, set his keys down, and glanced at the papers. More documentation, he asked calmly. I nodded, unable to speak. He scanned the pages, then said, we'll need to be thorough. Not, we'll be okay. Not, don't worry. Just procedural. I can gather photos, I said weakly. Statements from Hannah and Dylan. Bills. He said noncommittally. Something snapped at me then. Are you actually planning to file this with me? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I haven't decided what the best course of action is yet. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My legal status depends on this, I said. My job. My life. I understand, he said. And somehow that made it worse, because his tone suggested he did understand, and was still unmoved. Then why are you hesitating? He sighed, like I was asking him to explain something obvious. Because I have to consider my own position too. Your own position. As if we were opposing parties in a negotiation instead of husband and wife. I felt this strange detachment settle over me, like I was watching the scene from outside my body. So you might just not help, I said quietly. I didn't say that, he replied. I said I'm evaluating. Evaluating whether to stay married to me. Whether to support my residency. Whether to let my entire life collapse. That night, after he went to bed, I gathered every piece of documentation I could find. Tax returns, lease agreements, utility bills, photos from holidays, vet records for Baxter, greeting cards, receipts for furniture we bought together. Spread across the dining table, it looked like evidence of a perfectly ordinary marriage. And yet it suddenly felt flimsy, like paper shields against something much heavier. A few days later, Hannah insisted I meet with an immigration lawyer on my own. You need to know your options, she said firmly. Not his version of your options. I almost canceled 3 times. Walking into that office felt like admitting defeat, like crossing a line you can't uncross. The lawyer, Evan Brooks, had kind eyes and the exhausted demeanor of someone who had heard every variation of human messiness imaginable. I explained the situation in halting pieces, leaving out the part about the recordings at first, because saying it out loud made it feel too real. He listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes. Do you believe your husband intends to withdraw support for your petition? He asked. I don't know, I said. He won't say. Has he accused you of marriage fraud or misconduct? Not directly. Has there been any abuse? The word hung in the air. No, I said slowly. Not physical. Not obvious. He leaned back slightly. Sometimes individuals attempt to create a record that frames them as the aggrieved party in case of divorce or immigration proceedings, he said carefully. Documentation can be used in many ways. My mouth went dry. So I'm not imagining this? I can't speculate on his intentions, he replied. But you would be wise to document everything yourself. Everything. When I got home, Marcus was in the kitchen chopping vegetables like nothing in the world had changed. How was your day? He asked. Fine, I said automatically. He studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Dinner will be ready soon. We ate in near silence, the clink of silverware unnaturally loud. Baxter lay under the table, blissfully unaware that the humans above him were barely holding it together. Halfway through the meal, Marcus said, we should avoid discussing sensitive topics in public or with friends. My fork paused midair. Why? It's better to keep things contained, he said. Misunderstandings can spread. Contained. Like damage control. I talked to Hannah, I said before I could stop myself. He didn't react. Just chewed slowly, swallowed, took a sip of water. I figured you might, he said. You don't mind. I can't control what you do, he replied. But I would prefer discretion. Prefer. Everything with him was preference, caution, concern, never demands, never threats. Which somehow made it harder to push back. Later that night, I noticed something else missing. The folder where I'd kept copies of our financial documents was gone from the filing cabinet. At first, I thought I'd misplaced it, but after searching the entire office, I knew I hadn't. I walked into the living room where Marcus was reading. Have you seen the blue folder from the cabinet? I asked. He looked up, expression neutral. I reorganized some things. Where is it now? Safe. Safe where? Why would you move it without telling me? I asked. I didn't think it was urgent information. The casual dismissal made my chest burn. That folder contains documents I need. If you need something specific, I can provide it. Provide it. Like I had to request access to my own life. I stood there for a long time, waiting for anger to rise, for words to come. Instead, I felt this heavy, sinking sensation, the realization that the balance of power in our marriage had shifted so gradually I hadn't noticed until I was already on the losing side. That night, lying in bed beside him, I listened to his steady breathing and wondered how someone could feel so close physically and so impossibly far away at the same time. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. A message from Hannah. Are you okay? I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. I didn't know how to answer that question anymore. Because okay would imply stability, safety, some kind of control over what was happening. And none of those things felt true. Instead, I typed. I don't think I know my husband anymore. I didn't send it. I just stared at the words until the screen went dark. By the time winter started settling over Columbus, I had stopped expecting clarity. Every day felt like walking through fog, shapes were there, movement was happening, but nothing was sharp enough to grab onto. Marcus and I had developed this strange routine of coexistence. We shared the house, the dog, the bills, the same bed, but not the same reality. Conversations stayed shallow. Logistics only. Weather, groceries, work schedules. Anything deeper felt dangerous, like stepping onto ice that might crack. What made it unbearable was how normal he seemed. He still made coffee every morning. Still asked if I wanted anything from the store. Still texted me to let me know he'd be late from work. If someone had followed us around with a camera, they would have seen a perfectly functional marriage. But inside the house, there was this constant tension humming just beneath the surface, like electricity in the walls. The first real emotional crack happened on a Sunday afternoon. I was sorting through old photos at the dining table, trying to assemble the documentation packet myself. Vacation pictures, birthdays, random selfies where we looked happy, proof that at some point this had been real. Marcus walked in, glanced at the spread of photos, and froze for just a fraction of a second. You're still working on that, he asked. I don't have a choice, I said. The deadline is next week. He set his keys down slowly. We need to talk about expectations. My stomach dropped. What expectations? I don't want to submit anything misleading. Misleading. These are pictures of our life, I said, my voice tightening. How is that misleading? He picked up one photo from a beach trip 2 summers earlier. We were sunburned, smiling, arms around each other. This was before things deteriorated, he said calmly. Deteriorated. People don't stop being married just because they argue, I said. He placed the photo back on the table with surgical precision. I'm not comfortable representing the marriage as something it isn't. The words felt like a punch to the chest. So, what are you comfortable with? I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. He sat down across from me, folding his hands like he was in a meeting. I think we need to consider separation, he said. For a moment, I didn't process the sentence. It just hovered there, meaningless. Separation, I repeated. Yes, it would reduce tension. Give both of us space. And my immigration status? I asked. My voice sounded thin, far away. That would be handled through the appropriate channels. Appropriate channels. I felt something inside me crack open, not explosively, more like a slow, silent fracture spreading through glass. You're basically telling me you might let me lose everything, I said. I'm telling you I have to prioritize stability, he replied. For who? He didn't answer. Baxter padded into the room, tail wagging, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire world was being dismantled. I realized then that Marcus wasn't angry. He wasn't emotional at all. He had already moved past the point where feelings mattered. I saw you. Something strange happened then. Instead of anger, I felt this hollow calm settle over me, like my body had run out of adrenaline. How long? I asked. Months, he admitted. Months. While recording me. While documenting our arguments. While telling a lawyer he feared retaliation. Were you planning to bring her here? I asked. He didn't respond, but the silence said enough. I started laughing. Not because anything was funny, it was the kind of laugh that slips out when your brain can't process the alternative. So you replace me, and I just disappear? I said. That's not how immigration works, he said, sounding almost weary. But that was exactly how it felt. The days after that conversation blurred together. We stopped pretending. He slept on the couch sometimes. Other nights he stayed in the bed, but kept to his side like there was an invisible wall between us. I spoke to the lawyer again. Asked about worst-case scenarios. Emergency options. Timelines. Everything sounded complicated, uncertain, dependent on factors I couldn't control. At work, I moved through my tasks like a ghost. Safety inspections, reports, meetings, all the normal responsibilities of a life that suddenly felt temporary. Hannah tried to help. Invited me over constantly. Offered her guest room if I needed space. But leaving the house felt risky, like abandoning ground I might not get back. One evening, I came home to find Marcus in the living room with a stack of papers. I've been reviewing housing options, he said without looking up. For who? I asked. For you, he said. The casualness of it knocked the air out of my lungs. You want me to move out? I think it would reduce conflict. Conflict. As if this were just an uncomfortable roommate situation. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. There are short-term rentals, he said. Or you could stay with friends. Friends. While my legal status hung in the balance. And Baxter? I asked. He hesitated. It would probably be less disruptive if he stayed here. That did it. All the restraint, all the careful calm I'd been clinging to shattered. He's my dog too, I said, my voice shaking. This is my home too. I'm not disputing that, he said. I'm suggesting practical solutions. Practical. Stable. Appropriate. Every word stripped of humanity. I walked outside because I couldn't breathe. The air was freezing, sharp in my lungs, but it felt better than being inside that house. For the first time since this started, I let myself imagine leaving the country entirely. Packing 2 suitcases. Saying goodbye to everything I had built. Starting over in a place that no longer felt like home either. Neither option felt survivable. When I went back inside, Marcus had gone to bed. The papers were still on the table, neatly stacked, like a plan waiting to be executed. I sat there for a long time, staring at them. Eventually Baxter rested his head on my knee, warm and heavy and trusting. Tears started sliding down my face, silent and unstoppable. I don't know what to do, I whispered into his fur. He thumped his tail once, as if that solved everything. It was nearly dawn before I moved. I gathered the photos, the documents, my notes, everything I had been collecting, and placed them in a box. Not packing, not leaving. Just consolidating. Marcus came into the kitchen as I was sealing it. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep. He nodded, noticing the box but not commenting on it. For a moment we just stood there. 2 people who had once promised to build a life together now sharing a quiet room like strangers. Finally he said, whatever happens, I don't want this to get ugly. Ugly. As if it wasn't already. I wanted to ask him when he stopped loving me. Whether he had ever really loved me at all. Whether the version of our marriage I carried in my head had existed only there. Instead I just said, I don't either. Because the truth was, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want drama. I just wanted my life back, the one where I didn't feel like a guest in my own home, waiting for someone else to decide if I was allowed to stay. Now I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot outside my office, writing this, because I don't know who else to tell. The box of documents is on the passenger seat beside me. My phone keeps lighting up with messages from Hannah asking if I'm coming over tonight. I don't know if I should go home. I don't know if I should start packing. I don't know if staying makes me strong or just naive. All I know is that the person who once promised to be my safety net has become the biggest uncertainty in my life. So I guess my question is this. If the person with the most power to protect you is also the one quietly pulling away, do you stay and hope they change, or leave before they decide for you?